it's one thing after another. That's what life is. It's not always a tornado or a global financial crisis. It's also just stuff. Like, life is friction. Well, what I love about Stoicism is it's this 2,000 plus year tradition of people who are just sort of doing the best they can to not just sort of survive what life throws at them, but to thrive.
Hello, I'm Dr. William E. Morgan, president of Parker University, and today I have a very special guest, Ryan Holiday, author of many books, including The Obstacles Away, my favorite, and thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So we've had some interesting conversations about Stoicism and Marcus Aurelius and just a mindset that's different.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your philosophy and what's the thrust of what your message is.
Well, what I love about Stoicism is it's not mine. It's this tradition, this 2,000 plus year tradition of people just like us, maybe with more success or less success, more adversity, less adversity, who are just sort of doing the best they can to not just sort of survive what life throws at them, but to thrive, in the midst of what life throws at them. And so, if I had come up with this idea myself, it'd have a couple years of that. But we have centuries that this has been tested at the highest and the lowest levels. But Marcus Aurelius' favorite philosopher is this guy Epictetus, who's a slave. So you have extreme adversity, you have extreme success, and the philosophy sort of tested in this both ends of that spectrum, this idea that, we don't control what happens necessarily, but we control what we do about it. We control who we are through it. And that's, what I try to write about.
I've been a fan for years. We at Parker have been through a few trials, and you say, what's you're talking about getting back to normal.
Yeah,
normal is always chaos.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you guys have this tornado that comes through, and then you're like, that was awful. How do we rebuild? You start rebuilding, and then a pandemic happens, right? Like it's one thing after another. That's what life is. And I think sometimes people think these things are so abnormal because they don't have a sense of history, or maybe they even ignore, they take for granted just the sheer amount of daily difficulties that we face. It's not always a tornado or a global financial crisis. It's also just stuff. Like, life is friction, right? We have our plans, and those plans get disrupted, and things happen, people happen, and are constantly trying to adjust. And so I think the Stoic idea of like, well, how do you use that? How do you see it as an opportunity to grow and learn and change? Well, then you're going to be well suited for whatever happens. I mean, hopefully nothing happens, but it probably will.
Well, the obstacle is the way, but then also there's this concept of being anti-fragile.
Yes.
And as we talked about, as we were standing on a pile of rubble, we were totally destroyed. This campus was destroyed. We were growing by 11% year after year for the last 4 years. And so our team here, the culture at Parker has been able to imbibe this philosophy that it's almost like bring it.
Yeah. But it doesn't, I think it's important, like, to point out, like, it could have gone the other way, right? Like, it could have been the end, but you made a choice that this was going to be something that reinvigorated you, that it was going to be a challenge you were going to meet. You were going to use it to do things that ordinarily you couldn't have done or would have taken longer to do. And that's the sort of mindset or the mentality that we're talking about. You're faced with this moment, you're staring at the rubble. We have this choice, right? We have this choice about how we're going to respond, what we're going to do, what we're going to make of it. And it's not always going to make you grow more financially, but it's also an opportunity, to live up to your values, right? To be a leader, to help the people who have been affected by a sudden crisis, right? There's a lot I think it's important that when the Stoics are saying the obstacle is the way, saying the obstacle is the way or the opportunity to practice virtue, to be good as well as successful.
And we had a moment where if we had tarried, we would have never opened.
Sure.
My vice president, chief of operations, came to me with options. And I went to my board of trustees that if I had not got the approval from the board of trustees to basically get every portable building that was available in Texas,
Yeah.
to get every available generator, to hire one of 3 disaster recovery companies in the country.
Yeah.
In that 5-hour period, we would have never reopened.
Sure.
And part of it was being calm in a crisis.
Yeah, I imagine that's partly your military training also, which is like those first moments are the most critical. And so, when you are not good at handling stress, when you're easily overwhelmed, when you get distracted, when you are someone who wants to explore endless options or possibilities, that can all lend itself to a kind of paralyzation in these moments of crisis, where really what you need is fast, decisive choices, right? You need to pick a strategy and then act on that strategy. And in some cases, picking a strategy and acting on it is the strategy, right? And you might be wrong, but it's better. The most wrong option is doing nothing.
It's like General Mattis is a bad plan implemented now is better than a perfect plan that's implemented tomorrow.
Yeah, there's another line I like from Eisenhower. He says, plans are worthless, but planning is everything. And so the ability to go, hey, I understand that this is probably all going to get tossed in the trash, but the preparation and the sense that, hey, I'm someone who's thought about a lot of this, I know what I have at my disposal, that's really what you need at that moment, is the ability to go, okay, what are we going to do now?
And one of the phrases we use here a lot is good leaders anticipate,
Yes.
bad leaders react.
That's right. Yeah. You can't, the Stoics would say, you can't say, wow, I didn't think that would happen. I think one of the most dangerous phrases in business and in life is like, it's different this time. You have to be the person who is aware of how these things tend to go, which is they tend to go sideways, like things happen. And you have to be prepared for that, and you have to know what you're going to do in those situations.
I saw a picture. You might have seen it as well. It shows a picture of suburbia, houses in a row, and then it shows the war zone in Ukraine. Mm-hmm. And it said, but basically, people think this is normal and throughout history.
Yes.
When actually, this is the normal for most of history.
Yeah, that's totally right. And obviously, in the U.S., we live in a bit of a bubble, and but the interesting thing is you go, oh, look, since World War II, things have been great. But that's one version of looking at it. Actually, it's been one crisis after another that, because they were largely dealt with well, or they dealt with quickly, they didn't spiral into these big things. And so, yeah, I think understanding that's how life is, and that's what leadership is, and that responding effectively and decisively to difficulties is what it's all about.
We've talked a little bit about extending not lifespans, but health spans, and also that people tend to want to retire at like 65 or so. But we've asked the question: what could you do if you had 20 more good, productive years?
Sure, a lot.
And I've talked to a lot of medical doctors and nutritionists, and that's normally who I interview on this. But the question is, why have that?
Sure.
And I've got a group of friends of mine. We're at the retirement age, people I served in the military with, and I've lost 5 of them in the last 2 years to that. I say I lost them to retirement. They die. They're gone. They retired and died. What advice would you give someone, or what from your philosophy, how could you rectify the concept of 20 more good years, or giving more back after most people would have retired?
Yeah, I mean, it's a balance, right? Because obviously having purpose, having a project, having ways that you're useful is really not just motivating, but I think it's good for your overall health. I think, purposelessness, they call this deaths of despair. If you don't know what you're doing, if you don't know why you're here, it's hard, I think, for your body maybe to figure out. If you don't have a good answer to that question, your body doesn't have a good answer to that question, that's probably not good for your overall health. At the same time, I think we're also looking, a larger level in American culture of people who don't know how to step off the stage, right? Like people who are so obsessed with the identity that they get from their profession or their success that it comes at the expense, not just of the health of the overall system, but it comes at the expense of their family, their sort of so-called golden years. So I think it's a balance. You want to be committed to something, you want to have something that lights you up and gives you purpose, but also your job, your profession shouldn't be the only thing that gives you those things. Do you know what I mean?
It does make sense. So, but there is a point of, and it could be that those additional decades are dedicated to serving your family.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be working. It can be, and I when I was in practice, I would tell people you should not retire until you have something more important to spend your time on.
Yeah, David Brooks calls this the second mountain. You're finding your second mountain. And that second mountain should almost certainly be less financially motivated, less ego motivated, and more about being useful and of service and maybe doing the things that your success and prominence now affords you the opportunity to do in a way that when, early in your career you were looking out for number one, maybe you didn't get to consider as much. And so I think, yeah, how do you find the next thing for you to do, the next challenge for you to throw yourself into? It's really, really important.
And some of the examples you use in your talks, your writing, we talk about like Winston Churchill, that if he had retired at 65, none of us alive today would know who he was.
Sure. Well, look, when Churchill is tossed out of power in the 20s, he thinks it's over. He doesn't know this second act is coming. And what he throws himself into is basically becomes this sort of media personality. He writes multiple books. He starts this radio program. He writes these articles, and he doesn't know it necessarily. He's very motivated by speaking about what he sees happening in the world, which is the sort of rise of fascism in Europe. He's writing about it, talking about it, and he builds what is effectively this enormous brand, this enormous platform. He's a global media star. In fact, he's more famous in the US than he is in his own country. It's that credibility and that ability to communicate that he calls on when he is called back to power. So, yeah, I mean, I think he was someone who needed to be involved, who needed to have things to throw himself into. Frankly, he needed the money. Public service is not the most lucrative profession. He needed to go, write and work for a living. And so the way he throws him, those wilderness years were actually very busy, fulfilling, active years for him and then in other ways restful for him. I don't know if Churchill had worked steadily, in that 8 or 9 years where he's out of power, if he would have had the energy that he then drew upon.
Well, like you, he's an author who reflected and thought, and his series on the history of the English-speaking people is this huge work. But also during the Boer Wars, at the turn of the century, he was the biggest hero in the Boer War.
Yeah.
And he wasn't even in the military.
No, he's just a great writer. And he was a great writer, a great thinker. And that's really, what he was. Actually, he didn't always make great decisions, but he was a very effective communicator. And that's really what that role demanded. He, as they say, the sort of the Russians supplied the men, and the U.S. supplied the material, and what Britain supplied was the leadership in those early years of the rise of Germany, and it's Churchill's sort of determination and grit. That came from his, what he learned as a writer and a speaker and a thinker.
And sticky phrases.
Of course,
he had phrases that we remember today.
Yeah.
In the fields, basically.
Iron Curtain. I mean, he could sum up a situation and communicate it to people in a way that motivated them to take action, and that's really what he did, and that was save the world.
As we explore how to make sure that people preserve their intellect and their purpose in life as they age, what advice would you give to them?
I think obviously being active is super important. I think being active mentally and physically. So it's not just, hey, can you walk? Can you ski? Can you, do you exercise? But also, are you continuing to learn? The old people that I know that I find most exciting and interesting to be around and seem to be doing the best, they're always learning. They're taking classes. They're not the people that goes, what's social media? They know about all this. They might not use it all, but they're engaged and active and informed about what's happening in the world. And I'm always inspired by how lit up they are about learning from younger people. And I think that keeps you young.
It is amazing. And also that's not making the goal. Like I've had a friend who's, he has 3 retirements: a military retirement, law enforcement, and a social security. And that was the goal. And man, it's like game over.
Yeah, well, I mean,
He attained that, but that
right.
what's on a rocking chair.
What are you doing it for? And you know, it is a strange way to structure life, to do a bunch of things you don't want to do. So someday, hopefully in the future, you'll be able to do what you want to do. And then, you know, do you want to travel when you're 75? Like, is that the best way to experience these places for the first time? Probably not.
Yes.
You know,
Don't wait.
don't wait. Yes.
You've had a chance to have a relationship with the oldest man in the world.
Yes.
What wisdom did you learn from him, or what wisdom did you imply to him?
Yeah, so I got to know Richard Overton when he was alive. He lived in Austin. I don't know if he's the best, gives the best medical advice. He smoked cigars every day, drank whiskey every day, and he liked to eat ice cream every day. So he may have just been a genetic freak, but you know, he was a fascinating guy. I mean, he was a black man in Texas. So he's born in 1905, I think. So you think about what he experienced, what he was forced to endure. Like, his house is in East Austin, which is a trendy neighborhood now. But when he built that house 70 odd years ago, you know, that was the segregated part of town. And so he experienced terrible things that people did. He experienced racism and segregation and hatred and all that. And yet there was this sort of, not just a resilience in him, but like a joy in people and in humanity. I think, you know, he wasn't bitter, he wasn't angry, he was a great neighbor. He worked many, many years at a career he loved. So I think what you see in those people is a sort of an ability to adjust and adapt and to not let life wear them down or break them. So there's that sort of spirit that no matter what happens, they preserve and protect. The Stoics call this the inner citadel. As long as the inner citadel isn't pierced, it doesn't matter what happens externally or in the world.
I don't know if you're familiar with Admiral Stockdale and his experience.
Yes.
And he's a great example of that, protecting the inner citadel.
Yeah, I mean, so Stockdale studies Stoic philosophy at Stanford when the Navy sends him. And actually, when he's parachuting down into, you know, what he knows is going to be at best imprisonment and worst death, he says, I'm leaving the world of technology and I'm entering the world of Epictetus. He saw it, part of what he saw was this opportunity to test this philosophy that he believed in. And so, yeah, he found these things to keep him going. And the biggest of which was, I'm going to be there for these other people. And yeah, it was just an incredible
And I worked at the Naval Academy where he epitomizes the honor concept. They have a statue to him there. But also, some of the things with Admiral Stockdale, rather, is that he didn't have unrealistic optimism.
Yes, yeah, they call this the Stockdale paradox, which is the acceptance of the reality of the situation you're in, simultaneously held with a sense that you will prevail. And, you know, he says, I decided that if I survived, I would turn this into a thing that in retrospect, I wouldn't trade away. And so it's the decision to be better for what happened. That's the part we have control over. You don't have control whether you're a prisoner of war. You don't have control whether you're born in a racist society. You don't have control if your buildings get hit by a tornado, but you do have the choice to say, we're going to be better for having gone through this.
Do you read any of the New Testament?
Yeah, of course.
Apostle Paul talks about the Stoics. He is a Stoic.
So Paul, before he's St. Paul, he's Saul of Tarsus. And Tarsus is the Greek home of Stoic philosophy. And the coincidence of all that, I was just writing about this, Seneca's brother is Gaio, who is the one when Paul's case comes before him, he says, get this the hell out of here.
Yeah.
So there's this interesting intersection.
So so when you read this, when he talks about, you know, I become all things to all people, or that I can experience hunger and want and cold, it doesn't matter which way it is. I'm like, he has been so exposed to the Stoics that it's part of his personality.
Well, the cardinal virtues of Stoicism, which Zeno comes up with in the 3rd century BC, courage, discipline, justice, wisdom, those are the cardinal virtues of Christianity also. So they have this kind of shared Seneca and Jesus are born the same year. There is this kind of, we don't think of Jesus as a guy living in the Roman Empire the same time as Stoicism, but that's what it was, yeah. And so, yeah, anyone that was interested in Christian thought in those early days would have also been schooled in philosophy. And so they're both philosophies. One has a metaphysical, supernatural component that Stoicism doesn't have.
Crossroads of history, a common language, Greek,
Yeah.
the ancient world speaks, a road system that encompasses the world.
Sure.
And Christianity starts at the hub of 3 continents.
Yes.
It's and then of course, the combination of the Greek philosophies, but also the scientific method.
Yes.
It's the foundation for Western civilization.
Yeah. It's fascinating. And unfortunately, there's some clashes between the Stoics and the Christians, but I think they absorbed the best of each other.
We're drawn to a close. Thank you for this interview. What advice would you give us in parting? But also then, why pick that cross up every day and go on?
I mean, what choice do we have, right? I think that's part of it. I mean, I guess if it's a choice between quitting and going on, I'm going to keep going. That's how I think about it. That's what life is. Life is that choice. I don't think life is inherently meaningful. Life is inherently wonderful. Life is what we make it, and that decision to keep going and to be of use, to fulfill your potential, to build relationships. This is the meaning that we create. This is the purpose that we create, and that's to me far better than the alternative.
Well, thank you for joining us today. You've been listening to Ryan Holiday at Parker University.